Last year, we had a major bombshell in the offer sheet market, with both Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg being offer sheeted by the St. Louis Blues and eventually joining the team. But they weren't just solid components of the team, they were some of the main reasons why they ended up making the playoffs in the end, and both having great first seasons with the Blues. Because of that, I think the offer sheet landscape has changed completely, and with this RFA class looking absolutely stacked, there are so many different players that could get offer sheeted this summer. So today, I want to go through the 10 players who I think are the most likely to get offer sheeted this offseason, going through the cap situations, what their contracts could look like, and which teams could potentially go after them. So make sure you watch till the end for all the offer sheet talk and all the trade rumors here today, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout this year's offseason, which looks to be an absolute doozy. Now recently, we finally got the offer sheet compensation info, what it would take for your team and how much you'd have to give up to get a player in a specific AAV range, and it's pretty widespread. Now, it doesn't happen all too often, but if you offer sheet a player at $1.54 million or less, you don't have to give up anything. But then you get into the tiers where you have to give up at least a pick. 1.5 million to 2.3 is a third round pick. 2.3 to 4.6 is a second round pick. 4.6 to 7 million is first and third round picks. Then you go on to 7 to 9.3, first, second, and third. Then 9.3 to 11.7, two firsts, 1 second, and 1 third. And then over 11.7 is 4 first round picks. Even though this is a pretty good RFA class, I don't see anybody getting up that high. But I think if you are going to see an offer sheet this summer, it's going to fall between these 3 tiers here, between 4.6 million and 11.7. There are a few players especially who could get more in the higher range of this, more in the 9, 10, potentially $11 million range that I could see teams targeting. Now, starting this out here with a player that I think might go on the lower end of things in terms of the AAV compensation, let's go to the 10th player who I think is the most likely to get offer sheeted this summer, in Joel Hofer of the St. Louis Blues. Somebody that is slowly but surely making his way and solidifying himself as an NHL goaltender, and the last 2 seasons being really a brilliant backup behind Jordan Binnington. You can see in 30 games last year a .914 save percentage, and this year a .904. Not incredible numbers or anything, but for somebody who's 24 years old, somebody that's still really young at this point, with big size, big potential, there is, I think, an opportunity still for Hofer to become an NHL starter, and I think there's an opportunity here for a team to get creative, potentially pick Hofer up for a lower AAV and get your starter right there. I think you could have the potential to be ready for that position as soon as next year. It would definitely be a major bet to make, but in Hofer's case, he could be relatively cheap. I don't think he's going to get more than maybe $3.54 million on the open market out there. And if you're a team looking to offer sheet, I mean, the Blues are in an interesting cap situation right now as well. When we enter this offseason, the Blues will have the second least amount of cap space, and they don't have many other free agents besides Hofer. They got Radek Faksa, Ryan Suter, but if they are to sign Hofer, even in general, they're not going to have a lot of money left, likely only around $2 million, but I could see a team trying to squeeze the most amount of money out of the Blues, potentially making them pay upwards of $5 million and completely strangling them from acquiring anybody else. I mean, if you're a team in the Central Division, you need a goaltender, hey, you could either get Hofer or strangle the Blues cap situation. A team could get creative and really make the Blues hurt. I do think if it does come to an offer sheet, though, it will be below $4.6 million, because after that, you give up a first and third round pick, which, even though I like Joel Hofer a lot, I still think is a pretty steep price to give up. But below 4.6, you only have to give up a second rounder. So I could see a team going right up to that limit. And even if they get him, I mean, a second rounder for Hofer, I think makes sense considering what he could be. Next up, let's go on to the player that I think is the 9th most likely to get offer sheeted this summer. We go on to the Buffalo Sabres and JJ Peterka. Now, this is a completely different situation in the St. Louis because Buffalo has all the cap space in the world. They have all the opportunity to sign a player like JJ Peterka, but it's just a matter of if they really want to, because it seems like in Peterka's case especially, Buffalo is a little bit strange with how they view him, especially when it comes to the lineups and how I've heard their organization actually views Peterka. For some reason, it feels like they're a little bit lower on him than at least I am. I mean, as a 23-year-old, 68 points in 77 games this year after a 50-point season last year with 28 goals, I'm not really sure why you're low on him, considering he's one of the only young players that has been consistently great for this Sabres team. He is right at the top of my priority poll this offseason to sign for the rest of his career. He should be a lifelong Buffalo Sabre, but it could see a situation where Buffalo is a little bit stagnant with trying to sign him as an RFA, maybe going a little bit closer to the NHL season, at least the start of it, and potentially a team swooping them from under the rug and potentially putting an offer sheet out there. I do think Peterka is very likely to go into that $7 million plus tier. I mean, even if he is to re-sign in Buffalo, I think $7 million is pretty much the lower end of what Peterka is going to end up commanding, because I think he's quite frankly absolutely deserving of that. So if you are a team offer sheeting him around that range, it's going to be a first, second, and third round pick. But in all honesty, Peterka is a player that I think has proven to put up some massive numbers already at such a young age. If you're a team that's already contending, I wouldn't really mind all that much. So it's a situation where I could see a team really being able to strangle the Sabres, and especially as we've seen them not wanting to pay as much as possible, especially in different off seasons, not going after some major free agents. They're a team that doesn't want to spend any more than they have to, and I could see a team really making them try to pay for that. I think the reason he might be a little bit lower on this list is just because I think some teams assume that they'll automatically end up signing Peterka, even if there is an offer sheet offer. I think most teams would assume the Sabres would just match that. But again, with how I see the Sabres kind of viewing Peterka a little bit lesser than some people might expect, maybe they're in a situation where the offer sheet is upwards to $9 million. They just let him go for those picks. I mean, the Buffalo Sabres are so poorly run, I could see that actually being the case. Now, at number 8, let's go on to a player who I think is going to be a fascinating one in this offseason, whether he signs with them or not. Let's go on to Gabriel Valardi of the Winnipeg Jets, who I think is in a really unique position considering the value that he has really raised in his time with Winnipeg, especially how good he has been there in the point scoring department. I mean, you can see 36 points in 47 games last year for them, and then 61 points and 27 goals in 71 games this year. He's been a premier scorer for this Jets team and a really big cog in that machine. Now, the reason why Valardi is a little bit lower is because I think he will be one of the main priorities for this Jets team this offseason. They actually have a good amount of cap space at $25 million. They do, of course, have some critical RFAs like Valardi and also Dylan Samberg, but I kind of assume that the Jets will be letting go of Nikolai Ehlers, which I think leads a lot more money available to a player like Valardi, who's big, he's versatile, and even though the playoff performances haven't quite been there yet, I think he's somebody that will eventually be able to turn that page and still will be a core part of that Jets team, at least more of a core part than I see the Jets viewing Nikolai Ehlers, at least at this point. So I think the Jets will be able to pay him, and similar to Peterka, I think we'll get a similar AAV range. I do think the Jets are a bit more likely to want to keep a Valardi than the Sabres are wanting to keep a player like JJ Peterka, but at the same time, why he's a little bit higher than Peterka is just because the offer sheet interest. I think a lot of teams are going to want to potentially go after a player like Valardi, who again has that versatility, can play center, can play wing, has the size to boot, has the scoring consistency he's shown over the last few seasons. He's going to be an appetizing piece and is one that teams are going to be inquiring about, whether it be an offer sheet or a trade. Still, though, I don't see the Jets getting rid of him at any point. I don't think they'll want to do that whatsoever, but I could see an offer sheet that ends up getting accepted by Winnipeg because just the value proposition here, there's a lot you could get from a player like Valardi. Or you could try to screw over the Jets, which could be a possibility. Now let's go on to the 7th most likely player to get offer sheeted this summer and go on to a really similar situation to JJ Peterka, I would say, with Marco Rossi of the Minnesota Wild. Now, I do not understand Minnesota's disdain with Marco Rossi. How often we've heard of him in trade rumors and them just wanting to move in a different direction. It baffles me because you have such a brilliant, smart, two-way centerman here who's put up some great production for you this season. And yes, it's alongside players like Kaprizov, but even when he's been in smaller roles, he's still provided some good value. And sure, is he not the biggest player in the world? He is not that type of guy, but he just brings so much underrated value that I just don't understand the reasoning, trying to get rid of him so quickly, especially when he's so young at 23 years old. You need more players like this if you're Minnesota, at least in my opinion. I mean, again, they're so willing to get rid of a player who just scored 60 points, 24 goals in 82 games, especially when they need centermen who can drive play like Marco Rossi can. I don't understand it. But I think this is a prime opportunity for a team to not really give up too much for a player who could, I think, pretty instantly be a second-line center for you, especially if you're in a more rebuilding position. I think Marco Rossi can provide some really interesting value. I mean, it'll depend on what the AAV looks like, but I think it could go, honestly, a little bit lower from Minnesota's end than we expect. I think they're going to want to, again, look to potentially trade his rights if they want to re-sign him. I don't think they're going to give him a lot of money, more in the $4, maybe $5 million range. I could see a team wanting to offer sheet him, maybe getting 6, maybe even below 7, right below $7 million and really making things interesting. If you go just below $7 million, you'll only have to give up a first and a third round pick, which I think for Mark Rossi, and if he continues to improve, is a pretty fair estimate for him. I could see Minnesota being in a situation, again, where they want to target some big-time players, some big-time forwards this offseason. They could be a team that, especially if they don't have to worry about a Rossi contract, could potentially be in play for Sam Bennett as a centerman to add to that group. I think for Minnesota, they could look a lot different this offseason, and for a team wanting to add a versatile center like Rossi, I think the opportunity is there, whether it be through a trade or offer sheet. Again, I do think a trade is a little bit more likely, but an offer sheet would certainly be fascinating. Now let's go on to number 6, another player that seems to be all over the place in terms of their team's opinion on them, and let's go on to Noah Dobson of the New York Islanders, who is in a weird spot, making $4 million on his last deal. He is an RFA, needing a new healthy contract there, but he's someone that has been all over the place in terms of his value. I mean, you saw 70 points in 79 games last year in 2024 for the Islanders. This year down to 39 points, 71 games, and the defensive game looking about as nonchalant as it's really ever been. I think in the Islanders' case, they're in a unique position, especially with their first overall pick, trying to go after a player like Matthew Schaefer. I still think you should keep Dobson for the short term, having a player like that can put up some power play ability behind Schaefer, but it'll be an interesting one because I don't think the Islanders at this point want to sign Dobson to this mega long-term contract that I think Dobson would want to sign. I think it'll all come down to what Dobson can afford to stomach, because if the Islanders and Dobson can come to a 3-year type of deal, then I think a contract is pretty easily on the table. But if Dobson wants that mega long-term contract extension, then I think he'd have to get traded or potentially get offer sheeted. And I think offer sheeted would be the best way to do it. And I think for a lot of teams out there, they see the value that Dobson can bring offensively, what he can do when he is at his best. And I think for a lot of teams, like a first, second, third round pick, that they would easily trade that for a player like Dobson if they could. But it is tricky because I do think his value is a lot lower than it would have been if he was an offer sheet potential candidate last year in last year's offseason. That would have been I think a bidding war, 100%. But I do think because of the lackluster season this year, it actually makes the Islanders, I think, a lot more likely to actually give him up in an offer sheet and take the picks instead. I mean, if they're going to go in a more rebuilding direction as well, the prospect pool they're really building with potentially the first overall pick coming into the fold, and the picks you could get in a Dobson offer sheet, I mean, that would certainly put you in a good position in the future. I do think most likely Dobson will end up signing it with the Islanders and staying there, but again, if he wants that long-term deal, I could see that being a reservation that comes up and really makes things complicated. So for a team looking for an offer sheet candidate, Dobson could certainly be a good bet. Now let's get into the top 5 most likely players that I see being offer sheeted this summer, and let's go on to one that has been getting talked about a ton, and that is Matthew Knies. Now he is one that I see the Leafs really prioritizing this offseason, not wanting to let go, and for very good reason. He's been an extremely powerful power forward for them, and you see just over the last couple of seasons with his rookie season having some pretty solid numbers, 35 points in 80 games, and this year seeing the progression on top of that, getting 58 points and almost 30 goals in 78 games. He's been a great complementary piece for that first line, and really exactly what they need more of on the wing. I could see a team being crazy enough, especially with how he was able to prove himself in this last year's playoffs, of offering upwards of $8-9 million for a player like Matthew Knies. It might seem crazy, but for how much he's proved himself already as a younger piece, for how much of a playoff style he presents, how good of a complementary piece he can be, especially up the lineup and down it, I think he's somebody that a lot of teams are going to love that versatility, going to love that physicality, and go a little bit crazy when it's all said and done. And especially for a team like the Leafs, it will get interesting, especially if they do want to see re-sign a Marner or a Tavares. If they get offer sheeted on Matthew Knies, then that could present a lot of trouble. They might be in a situation where they have to keep Knies ahead of both of those players and have to send both of them into free agency, and Knies be the only big-time free agent they're able to keep. The reason he's not higher on this list is just because I think the Leafs will prioritize re-signing him. He is such a vital part of that team and a vital part of the heart of that core as well, and I think he's something that really you just cannot afford to lose at this point. Now we go on to back-to-back players from the New York Rangers here at number 4 and number 3. Let's go on to Will Cuylle and K'Andre Miller, and the Rangers are going to be a big one here because they only have $8.4 million to work with this offseason, which I don't even think is going to be enough to re-sign both of these guys, even at like team-friendly deals, in all honesty. I think if both of these guys re-sign, even on team-friendly deals, that'll cost still at least around $10 million, especially if they're longer-term deals. We'll see what ends up happening there. Maybe a Cuylle or a K'Andre Miller especially takes a shorter-term contract, but I think this is the perfect environment for a team to swoop in and potentially surprise the Rangers with an offer sheet that they cannot afford to accept. Pretty much the exact same situation the Edmonton Oilers were facing in last year's offseason, where you have a young forward, a young defenseman. Now, I do think both these guys are a little bit more proven, a little bit more experienced than Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway were, respectively, last year. But still, similar situation that I think a team could really strike while the iron's hot. I do think out of both of these guys, K'Andre Miller is a lot more likely to be the guy that is offer sheeted, just because I see the Rangers really wanting to sign Cuylle first, have that as a priority for how much he's been the lifeblood of that team, especially this last year, one of the only players really putting themselves in the fight consistently. K'Andre Miller has had his massive issues with the Rangers. Defensively, he's been all over the place. He still has, I think, top 4 potential, but has failed to realize that completely with the Rangers. In all honesty, I hope K'Andre Miller is offer sheeted because I think he will be much better somewhere else. But he to me is one that I see a big disparity in terms of what the Rangers are asking and what K'Andre Miller is asking. I think the Rangers will be pretty comfortable giving Cuylle what he wants, and I think he will command quite a bit. But K'Andre Miller specifically is something that I think is going to be asking for a lot more money, upwards of $5-6 million, while the Rangers are a lot more hesitant to do so. I could see them maybe offering around $4 million, a slight upgrade of what they offered him before, but I see K'Andre Miller wanting a lot more in the open market, and quite frankly, from an offer sheet, I could see him pretty easily getting upwards of $6.5 million. The potential is there, the frame is there, but I think realizing it has been a bit of a problem. But I could see in a different situation, different environment, him playing a lot better, and I think he could be a really underrated offer sheet candidate to go after, especially if you're looking for a left shot physical defenseman. There's still potential there, even if there has been some icky moments throughout the years. Now, we talked about K'Andre Miller as a defenseman that could get offer sheeted. We now go to the defenseman that I think is the most likely to get offer sheeted in this year's NHL offseason. Let's go on to the big one in Evan Bouchard. And I think the big thing about this is just how much money he could command from an offer sheet. If there is any player to go above that, I think it's $11.7 million, get up to that 4 first-round pick offer sheet range, it is Bouchard. I do still see it being a little bit less likely that happens, but for some teams out there, I could see 4 first-round picks actually being worth it. I mean, Evan Bouchard has been a prolific offensive player, and yes, he does benefit from the McDavid, the Draisaitl's of the world, but the consistent playoff performance, I think, is the big thing that'll make teams very interested. I mean, every single year, he always comes up in the big moments, especially in the goal-scoring department. He's something that I think a lot of teams would really crave, really go after, and at least try to make things tough for the Edmonton Oilers, because any offer sheet would absolutely do that. Currently, the Edmonton Oilers have about $9.4 million in cap space this offseason. We'll obviously see some moves, because I don't think Evan Bouchard is even going to be able to take an offer like that below $9.4 million this offseason, even if he does re-sign with the Oilers, even if he does sign to a lower term deal. I think he's still going to get around that $10 million range at the very least, especially if it's long term. I think you're looking at around at least $10.5, $11 million, maybe even more than that. So I think a team could potentially come in, go for a $12 million offer sheet, or maybe even below that, and be able to get Evan Bouchard from under the Edmonton Oilers. It would certainly be a devastating blow after what happened last summer, but that's why I see so many teams looking into this. Ultimately, though, I do still see Bouchard staying with the Oilers, but I could see it being an absolute bloodbath. It's a situation that I think is going to come down to the wire and really leave the Oilers with not many other options in this year's NHL free agency. It's really Bouchard or bust, because they have to keep him no matter what. But now we go on to the number 1 player that I see being the most likely to be offer sheeted and also taken away from his team, and I think Bouchard ultimately will stay with Edmonton. This is a player that I honestly expect to be taken away from my Dallas Stars. Let's go on to Maverick Bourque, and absolutely not even the same stratosphere of players in Evan Bouchard. If we're ranking offer sheet candidates in terms of the actual play, Bourque would be a lot lower on this list. But I think in terms of the players most likely to get offer sheeted teams I expect to be in on a player like him, Bourque I think could be a really interesting player out there, considering he's been a solid rookie for the Stars all throughout this year. Hasn't played much in the playoffs, but that's just because of the depth the Stars have. But at 23 years old, this is a player that I think that could pretty easily get offer sheeted and also taken away from Dallas. The Stars currently have the least amount of cap space going this offseason with $5.8 million, and I think re-signing a player like Jamie Benn will be a pretty high priority. I do see him taking a pretty big pay cut, but still ending around $3.5, maybe $4 million, which leaves less than $2 million to sign Bourque, which I think is way lower than I think what Bourque could end up signing for, around $2.5–3 million. But the big thing to me is I just don't think there's a lot of flexibility within that roster. There's a couple of players you could deal, maybe a Matthew Dumba, but who's taking Matthew Dumba at that AAV at this rate? I just don't see it happening. So you combine the lack of flexibility the Stars have to even trade for somebody if they do get an offer sheet on the table from Maverick Bourque, but also the lower AAV. And I think this will be something that does affect teams' decision making because, of course, if you're offer sheeting Evan Bouchard, you're giving up 4 first-round picks. But if you do offer sheet a Maverick Bourque, you could give up, what, like a second rounder? I think for a player like Bourque, that's pretty great, honestly. He'd be easily worth that. Again, the reason he comes down to number 1 for me is that he's the most likely to get offer sheeted and also taken away from the Stars team. It's a pretty similar situation to what the Oilers faced last offseason, where they had to make some tough decisions. In this case, I think they're going to have to give up a player like Bourque, take that second-round pick, because honestly, I don't think you're going to have a choice in the matter. So if a team gets creative, a team gets sneaky, and they really hate the Dallas Stars and their success, I could see a player like Maverick Bourque leaving, which would be a brutal blow for the future. But whoever gets a player like that, you're getting an immediate middle 6 wing, I think, for next season, and somebody that is so smart, so collected, and already so physically built, and I think a pretty under-the-radar prospect and player for the future. But those are the players that I think are the most likely to get offer sheeted this summer and gather the most interest this offseason. I want to know in the comments down below for you guys, though, what do you think of my top 10? Would you rank it in a different order? And who do you ultimately see getting offer sheeted on this list? Who do you think is the most likely to potentially leave their team on an offer sheet? Let me know all your thoughts down below. And of course, make sure you share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Click that like button, subscribe, and click on the notification bell as well for more hockey content just like this. And click on this card for all my hockey ranking content as well, right in one playlist for you to binge. I will see you guys in the next one, though. Have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.